Alrighty. Good afternoon for me, or I guess it's good morning for me. I just wanted to take a few minutes to show students how to use quotes from a story to support their answer to a question. I'm going to use an example from The Secret Garden because most recently some of my students in one of our reading courses took a quiz about The Secret Garden, and I just wanted to use this as an example. Many times as I was grading the quiz, I noticed some really strong quotes were used to support the answers to the questions. But I've noticed that we're kind of struggling to really use those quotes to help support the actual answer. So I just kind of want to give you some guidance there moving forward, because as you go through your education, using quotes to support your arguments is just going to keep coming back. So I just want to show you some ways to do that. So here's an example from a quiz that some of my students took. The question is, why doesn't Mary, and this is from The Secret Garden, why doesn't Mary want to play with the English clergyman's children? Include a quote from the book to support your answer. So most students answered this question saying something to the effect of, Mary doesn't want to play with the children because they are mean to her and tease her. Okay, so that's a good answer. They say, Mary, quite contrary. Okay, and then they quote the little limerick or the little song. And let's say that was page 12. I'm not sure what page it was, but we'll just say that was page 12. So this is not a bad quote. This is helpful because it shows what they said to her. However, if you really think about the question, you always have to go back to what the question is actually asking of you. Why doesn't Mary want to play with them? So if I look at this quote, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? If that's my quote, that doesn't necessarily answer the why. That gives an example as to how they are mean to her and tease her. But what you have to do as the writer, as the person answering the question, is you have to assume that the person that will read your answer doesn't connect the dots. And so you have to be super obvious with the connection there. Because when I read this, I see, okay, so this is a quote that from the children. But I still don't specifically understand why that tells me why Mary doesn't want to play with them. So all you would have to do is continue explaining that, okay? Before we get back to that, I want to give an example from Finding Nemo, because I love that movie. If you haven't seen Finding Nemo, that's okay. You don't need to in order to understand how this works. So a question that someone could come across if they were answering questions about Finding Nemo is, why does Dory trying to speak whale upset Marlin? So if you remember that scene, or if you haven't seen it, essentially they're trying to figure out where they're going. They're not sure which way to go in the search for Nemo. And Dory says, oh, I can speak whale. And she tries speaking whale in hopes that the whales will guide her and tell her what to do. And Marlin, at this point, this is actually an important part of the movie, because this is where Marlin gets really fed up with Dory and yells at her. So the question is, why does Dory trying to speak whale upset him? And based on this type of answer, I would guess an answer that I might receive would be something like, Marlin is frustrated when Dory tries to speak whale because he doesn't think she can do it. Dory says, and if we're finding a quote here, can you give us directions? Now, I know I didn't sound as good as she did, but I tried. So, again, this is an example of what she said, but it doesn't, that quote itself does not prove why Dory tries to speak whale, or why Dory speaking whale upsets Marlin. Just like up here, Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? That's an example of what the children say, but that itself doesn't specifically answer why doesn't she want to play with them. Okay. So what I would do with this Finding Nemo example is I would personally try to find a better quote. I'm not saying that you need to find one for Secret Garden, but for this one, I would try to find a better quote because I don't think "Can you give us directions" is ultimately going to help me explain why Marlin is upset. Okay, so I would go back to my book or back to my movie, and I would keep searching for a quote that helps me. Like, where did I realize, oh wow, Marlin's really upset? I don't think he was upset from this quote. This led him to become upset, but I think that he's going to give me more evidence because he's not going to answer, Dory, I'm upset with you because da 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 da. Right? It's not so easy. But I want to focus on Marlin and why he's upset. So, digging, watching, trying to figure this out. And then voila, I come up with a good explanation. Marlin is upset with Dory because he feels she can't actually speak whale. Yet she tries to convince him that she can. This reminds Marlin of his son, Nemo, who thought he could do all of these things, like go to school alone, swim in open water, etc. But Marlin didn't think he could. Okay. So that's like a little teaser. So this is why I think he's upset, because Dory reminds Marlin of Nemo. When Nemo at the beginning said, I can do it. And Marlin said, no, you can't. Dory's saying, I can do it. And Marlin's saying, no, you can't. So this is my reasoning. Do I have a quote? I found one. I sure did. When Dory is, so what I'm doing right here is I'm setting up the quote a little bit. I also noticed in some answers, we just kind of, threw the quote in. So it's helpful to kind of give a little context. In other words, a little background to the quote so that the person viewing your answer understands, where you got this quote. So when Dory is trying to explain that she can speak whale, Marlin yells, and this is a direct quote, no, you can't. I think you can do these things, but you can't, Nemo. And let's say, I'm supposed to put a page number, but it's a movie. So let's say that was 72 minutes in. Oh, sorry, I have an update real quick. Okay. 72 minutes in. Alrighty. Where was I? Okay. So looking at this quote by itself, no, you can't. You think you can do these. You think you can do these things, but you can't, Nemo. Okay. So this quote on its own doesn't answer the question. Just like my answer here doesn't answer the question, or doesn't answer it well because it needed support. So after I give the quote, what I really have to do is connect my idea, which is here. I'm going to highlight this just to help, to the quote. Okay. So I'm going to make that a different color altogether. I'm going to make it blue. Oops. Marlin is misplacing his anger with Nemo. I only have 2 seconds left.